Oh yeah, my couple times that I streamed live, like when I was working on my art, it would have like a 5 minute, like it would go live and I would try to be setting up, and then I'd rewatch it again and I'd be like, oh, I probably could have edited that out, but I'm like, yeah, let's leave it in.
Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. Yeah. Hello, everybody out there in Podcastlandia. Welcome to this week's edition of the BODP with myself here, X. Welcome to the BrushesofDoom Podcast in 2024, man. It's like years traveling forward with this goddamn podcast. But, man, yes, after everything that has gone on, we are back. We are in the Sanctorum, sitting down here. For anybody that doesn't know what the BODP is, if you're coming from Sacred 8 Studios or whatnot, this is a free podcast that goes over art, techniques, knowledge, whatever you want to call it. It's like the reading rainbow of artistic retards. So, all right, beyond that, I have with me today this dude I met at a printing shop down the way that helped out with a lot of design for the studio when it came to our decals, our logos, our everything, when we needed to actually get it like made outside of stuff that like my wife does. And so through those people, I met this individual who just did phenomenally beautiful art. And now getting to know him through his own endeavors, his podcast, his YouTube channel and everything, I wanted to come and bring him in to bring up the new year. So without further ado, Kiren.
Hey, man.
How do you say your last name?
Bagchee.
What is it?
Bagchee.
Bagchee?
Yeah.
Awesome, dude.
It's actually pronounced Bagchee, but in Bengali or whatever, it's actually a different spelling too. But my dad kind of simplified it a bit when he moved over here. So,
all right.
But yeah.
Well, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty good, dude. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm stoked, dude. Like really stoked.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where does Kiren begin?
Well, I'm from Hayward originally, which is right next to Oakland, if you guys don't know where that is. Grew up there, about 96, moved to India. My dad's from India. My mom's Irish. And went to school there, lived there for a few years.
Move the mic up.
Oh, sorry.
You're fine.
Lived there for a few years. And then as I got older, I kind of, I've always sort of been into digital art. I think like my first experience with it was probably when I was about like maybe 12 or 13. I had an older brother who worked at a computer place, and he had like a hand scanner and like Photoshop, and so I kind of messed around with it. But when I was living in India, I decided to go to school to kind of learn, graphic design, and then the school wasn't that great. It was like one of those kind of like, they took our money, but we didn't get any like credentials from it, But it did kind of like catapult my career in what I'm doing now. So and in a way, it was kind of successful in that sense.
Yeah.
But around when I was about 19, 20, I actually moved back here to kind of just start my life, and then. Yeah, long story short, met my wife about 17 years ago, got married, had a kid, and now I'm kind of living the dream, man.
Yeah, so are you going solo now? Like, are you fully freelance?
At the moment, yeah, I'm still looking for full-time work. I do part-time work for Good Vibes Presents. Shout out. Yeah, I love those guys. They hooked me up with this kind of part-time gig. But other than that, I'm pretty much just doing my freelance stuff at the moment. But yeah, it's been, freelance it's fun, but it's also when it becomes like, you like need to make money, or it becomes almost like, when fun becomes like, okay, I need to do this, there's a big difference between like just having a hobby and then actually doing it to survive, So this was a big experience for me the last like year and some months, doing this. But I've learned a lot for sure. Like, not to turn down certain jobs. Like normally, like I would turn down certain jobs like before, but now I'm kind of like very open-minded to just doing anything. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Like,
is this the first time you've ever gone freelance?
Yes. Obviously I used to work at a beer distributor doing signs for 14, 15 years.
Oh, wow.
And it was a nice job. It was like I was able to just kind of, work basically by myself, like just print everything and, but deep down inside, I was always like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to be able to just like work from home, get a bunch of clients, just do work and kind of have your own schedule, this and that. And then kind of fast forward to now, it's like when it becomes like a necessity, it's almost like, I wouldn't say be careful what you wish for, because I'm grateful for having the ability to actually do artwork and make money from it, because obviously like if I didn't have this kind of like ability, I wouldn't be able to do it. So in that sense, I'm very grateful, but it's a lot different than I imagined. Like I was kind of like, you always think it's going to be better than it actually is, but I think at this point I'm still kind of, even though I've been doing this for 20 years, it's only up until recently I've been starting to get like continuous clients and like kind of building relationships, because one thing is when you have a day job, you tend not to push yourself as much because you just like have something to rely on. But the moment you're like on your own, you kind of tend to, get uncomfortable and start doing stuff that you normally wouldn't do. And I think that's kind of like what happened with me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was funny because there was a phenomenal aspiring tattoo artist that came in today, and she was super cool. She is from another local shop. And the thing she was talking about was like, I introduced them as a tattoo apprentice to my client, and they very quickly were like, no, I'm not an apprentice, not yet, not this, not that. And I was like, hey, like, I just have a quick question for you. Do you respect me? And they were like, oh yeah, of course. Like, oh cool. Do you respect the person that you're coming from? Meaning like the shop they work at as a desk person. Oh yeah, of course. Cool. So whose word is more important in the world of art for you? And you see like the blank stare of not like stuck, but more of what do I say? And I said, it's a rhetorical question. It doesn't matter if that person doesn't see you as an apprentice, and if I see you as an apprentice. It matters how you see yourself and how you're accountable for that. And for me, I think about this thing that we talk about, especially with the Sanctorum. You've seen what this place was when it was just a small room.
Yeah.
And most people that listen to this podcast remember when it was in the original location, and then it was just my bedroom that I was doing this. And the reality of it is that you will ask the universe for $1 million, and the universe will turn back and say, here's a hammer. We always imagine ourselves at the apex of where we're going in our career, but never like the crescendo up. And that's the hard part, is that when you go independent, this is my 18th year coming this March that I've been a professional artist, and I've never had another job but this. I've had highs, I've had lows, but I've never in my life said, fuck, I need to do something else to make money. And it's different because once you go independent, you start realizing like, well, am I this? Am I not this? Am I good? Am I not good? Then when you go independent, you're like, what do I think I am? What am I doing? It's the accountability of that.
Yeah.
And like, for example, what caught me about your work was I'm a big storyboard artist. Like I love storyboards, and I love, especially right now, it's called like liminal art on TikTok.
Okay.
Huge movement of really down tuning from like a minor chord to a minor seventh or something, and then they do it very soft. It feels like like you're lost in a 1990s dream, but they're using a lot of art from AI of things in the woods and so forth. Your art gives me that feeling where I feel like it's spatial. It's not just there, it's real. And I feel that the hard part is there's so many artists in today's age that absolutely have a tremendous amount of potential, but they don't listen to themselves. They listen to terrestrial reason. And what I mean by that is, well, how are you going to pay for this? And how are you going to do this and that? No, it's different. You have a child and a wife.
Yeah.
I have a wife, no child. I have my nieces, and I help them out, but I mean, it's not the same. But the reality is when you start going solo as an artist, you now have to be accountable. Cool, you can work whenever you want, go whenever you want, and do whatever the fuck you want, but at what cost? you taking that 2 hours off, you got to make up that 2 hours somewhere.
Yeah, and it's not like you can shut off like answering emails, because like, I mean, it's almost like you're working all the time when you're freelance. It's like, because any moment, any conversation you have with somebody's a potential job in the future or whatever. It's almost like, yeah, like it's like a 9 to 5, you clock out, you can kind of forget it and just go home. But when you're like, I'm constantly thinking, okay, I got this, I did this logo design. Okay, what's the next thing? What do I need to do to get this job? I need to hit this person up. Do I need to contact so-and-so? It's like your brain's constantly kind of going, which, doing this for so long, I'm kind of like accustomed to that kind of thing. And for me, the freedom to be able to just kind of, if I need to spend more time with the family, or I have a family emergency, I can just drop everything and just do it, as opposed to, okay, I have to ask my work, hey, can I take this day off or whatever? But yeah, there's also part of me misses that, the routine of going to a job and coworkers and all that stuff. And that was a huge thing, is the coworkers, the
environment.
The environment, the communal thing, where you kind of feed off of each other. How was your weekend? Now it's like, I'm pretty much, I'll go to the beach occasionally. I'll go out, to go for a walk, or I'm pretty structured in that sense, where I'm routine. Like, I'll have like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, all that stuff. But there are days where I miss like just interaction, like being with another person,
discourse. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard for some people, because I feel like myself, I'm the opposite. I like to be away from people. I don't want to be around anybody. And anybody that comes to the Sanctorum or has ever known me knows that, like, you can have a one-on-one with me at any time. I'm very easily approachable, but I'm listening to what you're saying, but I also have a very high ADHD, where, again, there's a reason why I need 50 things to do, because my brain can't just focus on one thing. But when people come into that mix, it becomes very difficult, because I do want to be attentive to that individual, but I also want to work. And it's rough, because when I was working in tattoo shops where you had 8 or 9 artists, it was hustle and bustle. You had a lot of laughs, you had a lot of this and that, but one person's like, fuck, man, I just want to relax for a little bit. And then it kind of trickles down to where nothing's getting done. And even though I can be pretty solid on that, it's a camaraderie thing. You have to kind of earn your stripes in both artistic, like an artistic crucible, but also in like a social crucible. And I feel that that's where it's hard, right? Because when you don't have that, your work can thrive, but are you really learning anything, and are you really getting the most out of yourself if you can't have that exchange, if you can't have those moments? So yeah, I feel that it is difficult for a lot of artists that don't have an environment. Like, that's why I've always loved Studio Blur. When it comes down to do you know who Studio Blur is?
No, I've never heard of that.
So the gentleman who owns Studio Blur is very famous for every single cinematic scene you've ever seen, from Halo to DC Universe Online, Call of Duty, Warhammer, World of Warcraft, and Tim Miller. And he is responsible for Love, Death, and Robots.
Okay.
And so he was a type of guy where he wanted to make the ultimate studio, and then it eventually became a thing of like 100 heads. So he hits up the top 13 studios in the world and says, I want to use my own money. If you can come up with a story that is at the peak of what your group can do, we'll put you in this. Your only 3 premises are Love, Death, and Robots. And you saw just a phenomenal use of art and drive and just variety. I think it's in everyone's head to believe that individual, like, do you know who Kiren B is?
I think I've heard of him.
He was a legendary artist from Supersonic, who unfortunately passed away last year. And dude can draw 60 by 80 canvases.
Oh, okay, I think I know who that is.
Yes.
He has glasses.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I know who that is. Yeah.
One of my favorite artists in the entire world. And he would draw anything out of his head.
Okay.
And the dude just, if you want to know how to draw a car in every perspective a million times. There you go. Well, how do you draw these people out of your face? I've drawn a million people a million different ways. Like it's just that he's literal. So shout out to our buddy Jamaro, who's the artist over, the head art director over at Marvel Snap. And he talked about hanging out with him at San Diego Comic-Con. And like when they would walk from building to building, he had a sketchbook. And then he had a different sketchbook. Like it was a need. And I think a lot of people love to believe that could be them solo. I can create the world. But when you look at Studio Blur's example, you have to have a social stability with other artists to feed off of. Like you said, having that routine is nice, but if you're not around enough people to bounce ideas off of, where does that story really go? People think Kim Gee's this amazing dude, but he was part of Supersonic, which is an entire collective of artists. You just knew his name, because they pushed him the hardest. So how do you, as an individual, coming from myself, like a question, how do you find your art has benefited from working solo, and how do you think it's suffered from working solo?
Well, to be honest, most of my artwork was created solo. Like because maybe I shouldn't say this, but like my when I worked at the beer distributor, between when it was their slow periods, between jobs, I would work on my own artwork.
Don't worry, I won't tell them.
They know now. But it helped a lot because I was able to like literally put out one piece a week, and kind of build my portfolio. But I've always sort of like when I'm working on stuff, I like tune out everything. I just like have my music on, and it's always been like that. But it's not really the creative being around people to be creative for me. It's the taking the break, I guess, like having the day job to sort of separate from your art life, and I kind of like lately I've been feeling that, like, sometimes I'll get jobs with good vibes and I'll be working on stuff all morning, and I'll be actually more inspired to work on my stuff than if I had the whole day open to do whatever I wanted. Right. So there's almost that, like, when you're limited in your time, I find myself more creative than when I have all the time in the world to work on something. And I think that's what, when I was doing stuff at my old job, it was kind of that, I have time, I have that little window to kind of work on something, and then it's like, okay, work comes in, I have to take a break. Right. And I don't know if that was anything to do with my like creative spark or what, but I kind of like to say that. I mean, it's like definitely having that disconnect, like
it's like a reset,
separation. Yeah,
it's like a nice reset. I think what's funny from my perspective of it is, so we've had quite a few tattoo artists come in or come out of the shop, and my thing is, these days I'm speaking to artists. You need to work on this. You need to look at this. You need to look at that, for the sake of like improving their skill, which is what they're here to do, is learn from myself, but also improve on their own. Then I had two of my mentors come in the other day, R.C. Kelly and obviously the amazing Taylor, and Raul Suarez, two people that I absolutely love and have them tattooed right here on me.
Nice.
And when I'm around them, it's much different. We speak at each other, to each other, and we speak with each other. So what would you do with this? Well, honestly, if you do this and this, and I would do this. And it's like a quick 30 to 40 minute conversation, which in, art world is pretty quick. But like you're having it and like you feel jazzed, and then you go back to your desk and you zone out. I think that's what you're talking about, because it's like I need that so much these days, where I never wanted to be a boss. I'm a great team leader, but I'm a better team player. And I feel like a lot of people get to that point professionally where they're like, I can be my own boss. But it's like, yeah, man, but if you can work with a group and be a better team player than anything else, you would do triple the better work, because you have influence. You may do things monochromatically. I may do things polychromatically. And then we both teach each other something that expands. If you don't have that interaction, it does get at you. And having that ability to knock ideas off each other really helps you to grow. Shout out to my brother, Joseph Cabello, another phenomenal artist. And he and I were talking about this recently, but like why artists don't like taking risk, because you get to be really good at something. And then the next person right next to you gets to be even better. And then you try something new and you really fucking suck at it. And you're like, oh, God damn it. And because of that, they don't want to expand their skill because they fear looking weak. They fear looking incapable. And that is where a lot of people get stuck. And I feel that you get that regardless if you're solo or if you're in groups. But I feel like when you're in groups, if you're around the right ones, they encourage you to get out of that shit, which is a really good thing.
Yeah,
you know?
totally. Yeah, I understand that. It's like, for me, it's, you know, because every few years I'll get really into a style, or like, you know, I know like 5 years ago I was really into like, you know, Boris Vallejo, Frank Frazetta, and like all my art was like, you know, big tits and like scantily clothed women on.
Stop,
like,
I can only get so hard.
Yeah, you know, it was like, but it was a tribute because I love that artwork and I love that. But then after a while, you're like, you know, okay, I need to do something different. So it's like every so often I try to change it up, and it's not like I do it on purpose. It's more of just out of boredom. I get tired of doing the same thing. That's why I'm always amazed when I see artists and like they put out the same type of work for like 20 years, and it's like, I don't know how you do that, you know? Like, example, Bill Sienkiewicz, like his stuff is just so like experimental and like interesting to me that like I don't see him ever getting bored of, like, because he's just like, okay, I'm gonna do this like crazy detailed, like, you know, Renaissance kind of painting, and then all of a sudden do some like, you know, watercolor with, you know, splatters and pen marks and, you know, that kind of stuff I really love because it like keeps things interesting, and it's not like you're fitted in a style, and there's no reason to kind of, you know, keep a style unless, you know, you're getting paid to paint a certain way or whatever. And,
right.
Which, you know, that's probably a few artists like that. They're known for a certain style, so they can't like deviate from it.
Thomas Kincaid.
Yeah. Well, even like Alex Ross, for instance. I mean, I love Alex Ross. Yeah.
He is the reason I got into painting. Like him, and obviously like your J.C. Leindeckers, your Rockwells. I've always loved the depiction of the human form in these hyper dramatic, hyper warm ways, and that's what inspired me to do it. And I remember somebody telling me one time, I hate Ross's work because it's just boring. And I go, okay, can you tell me why? And he goes, it's the same thing. It's just real people. And it's funny because from someone like me who grew up without that, as you yourself, you look at that as like, wow, dude, some of this stuff is really gnarly. He's the whole reason why I took up watercolor and gouache, you know, and it ended up working out for me as a tattoo artist because it's not forgiving. You know what I mean? Like if you fuck up, you have to work through it or around it, but you can't avoid it. Unlike acrylic, digital, or oil, where it's like, go over it.
Yeah,
Control Z. And I feel like that was such a good discipline when I first started, because had I been able to make 100 mistakes versus 2 very calculated wrong ones, then I would have never really learned. And Ross is such a good example of somebody that, like, you look at him like, fuck, man, he does a painting a day. But I mean, this is the asshole that goes to Comic-Con in a sketch page, and 8x10 is $25,000, and you're like, God.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely kind of earned his. I mean, I don't know how anybody could spend that much on a drawing, but like, you know, more power to him. I mean, it's like, you know, artists are struggling right now, so it's like, hey, if someone's making that much, you know, good for them. I kind of like, I understand the whole Alex Ross argument, saying he does kind of stick to his lane a bit, like his stuff, like even his new stuff, like it's like I'll look at it and go, oh, is that an older piece that he's reposting, or did he read? Because it's very, I mean, but you can't deny that he's fucking amazing. Like I mean, so I use gouache as well. Like he was the reason why I started using gouache, and like you said, it's like
gouache bros. Yeah,
it's fucking difficult, especially like, you know, I'm still learning how to paint. Like I draw, like I'm more of a pencil sketcher, and like, you know, I took life drawing in college and things like that, but painting has always been the big fucking like elephant in the room for me. Like it's always been a challenge, like mixing colors and, you know, making sure things aren't all muddy and like, you know, all that stuff, whatever. But yeah, definitely I enjoy it. I mean, it's another thing to step away from what I normally do with the computer doing painting, it's a nice break, you know. You're not like looking at a screen.
I think that's what I get a lot of, is where, from my perspective, painting is everything to me. I hate doing digital. I love digital work. I just hate doing digital myself. And one of my buddies, Barry, was like, it's because you don't understand it. I go, no, I get it. I just get it's fucking stupid. And he starts laughing because he's like, you just don't get it. I go, you're right. I can't do digital work very well. It's a tactile thing for me. I think it's gorgeous when done right, because there's so many, like Sam Grech is one of my favorite artists that does a beautiful mixture of almost like a Zorn palette mixed with a Rockwell palette, just very nice and warm, but that goes off these muted greens and blues, but it's like a Pixar animation, and he does these really beautiful like caricatures of things, but it's all digital. But if you look at his actual paintings, like his real gouache and watercolor, it's the same thing. He just found a way to translate it. I feel like for myself, it's hard to translate digital because my brain loses interest immediately when I can take it away. When I have to commit to something, that's when my brain gets that extra feed of something, which is why I think when I design with like Procreate, I can lock in, but then I get burnt out. But if I'm painting physically, that's like a break from that. Even though you're like, I could paint the same thing digitally and I could paint the same thing physically, and it's like you said, it's two different parts of your brain.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. I'm I can't, to be honest, I don't really digital paint. I hate using my, like, I have a stylus. I have like a not a Cintiq, it's an XP pen or whatever. I tried the Cintiq. It fucking annoyed the shit out of me. Like I just can't, even like an iPad, drawing on an iPad, I just can't figure it out. Like, I know a lot of people use it, and I'm just sort of like, it's just, I can't, my brain can't comprehend just having to change little knobs and like having a million brushes as opposed to like one pencil.
Right.
I think it's just the simple pencil on paper, an eraser, like that's all you need. And it's kind of like any more options, it messes with you, you know. And but yeah, like I respect all digital artists. Typically most digital artists, they go digital because of commercial work. It's just it's easy to make revisions, easier to, you know, and I understand that because I know like a lot of traditional painters they do a lot of album covers, and usually the, like, you know, the thing is like when you do a cover, it's like, hey, this is what you're getting, like I ain't doing any changes. Like if you're at that level where you're just like, I'm gonna paint you something and this is what you're gonna get, then that's awesome. But like majority of the time, like, 'cause I work with musicians, I do album artwork, and it's like 9 times out of 10 there's always one change. I mean, rarely you'll get oh, this looks fucking amazing, perfect, but for the most part you need to do changes and stuff like that. So
could you make it more illegible when it comes to our band name? I want a bunch of sticks. No, like a shout out to No Name Collects in the chat, but he was saying it's like with Peach Momoko. Are you familiar with Momoko's work? Mm-hmm. So Peach, phenomenal artist, but very like whimsical, but rad watercolor art for Marvel and DC. She was somebody that they kind of pushed towards the end, where it's like a 1 in 500 cover, because nobody, like, it was easier to just be like, there you go, you know?
Yeah.
And it became such a commodity that people are like, wow, you got a Momoko cover. And I feel like it's the Ross curse, so I call it. Alex Ross's stuff is so readily available now that it's for a niche type of person, right? But then you go ahead and you look at Momoko's stuff, and her stuff abso-fucking-lutely was like really nice and cool, and then it got just kind of a little bit less, and then now it's like some of the stuff you're just kind of looking at and like, well, it's nice, and you could see the fatigue in her work, because now it's 100 Momoko covers. It's 25 different this or 25 different that, and it becomes such a like a collector's thing that now they're so fatigued they can't keep up. Ross can keep up with it because that's all that dude knows. A lot of people don't know that Ross's mom was a famous painter.
Oh, and yeah, I watched a documentary on him, and I found that out,
Yeah, and how she would do the JCPenney stuff and everything. So, like, his entire life he's just been That's life. Paint, right? You don't do anything else. And so I think it does get to a point where people start getting exhausted, and digital kind of works in that way because you can just kind of do this, do this, do this. You like it? Nope, cool. Then let's change this. And it makes almost like a streamline, you know? So you started working on band covers. How did you go from doing your art, and how did you go into where now people you've done quite a few band covers?
Yeah, I mean,
or I should say album covers.
Yeah, album covers. Well, the first like official album cover I did was actually for my brother's band. His band was called Assist. They're out of Watsonville. And it was one of those, they were recording and they needed a cover. And at the time I was dabbling in Photoshop, and like I always wanted to like do album covers, but at the time, this is like 2002, 2003, whatever, there wasn't a lot of like online stuff where you can like meet people or whatever. So it was like pretty much like I was like, okay, I guess I'll do my brother's album cover, and so I did that, and that was my first experience actually getting it printed and all that stuff. And from that, it kind of like, you know, I was like, okay. And then I used to play music too. I played drums for a band called Nothing Left. I did our album cover, and we'd play shows, and I'd meet bands, and you know, I would talk to them and say, hey, I can do, you know, this and that. And it just kind of built off from there. Like they found out I could do art. They found out, you know, and then it just sort of like, you know, I haven't actually, to be honest, I mean, I've done quite a bit of album covers, but I probably could have done more if I actually was like motivated. 'Cause that's another thing I battle, is like the motivation aspect of it. But yeah, definitely I have a very fondness with album covers because I'm a big music buff. I love music. I grew up with all the greats, you know, like my older brother opened my mind to like a lot of good music. I just love the whole experience, listening to music, looking at the artwork. And when I was living in India, I used to draw album covers and, you know, like tapes and things like that, CD covers. I would hand draw them and all that stuff. So yeah, I was always kind of, you know, been there, you know, and then it sort of moved into like book covers. Like lately I've been did a few book covers in the last few years too, which I kind of like as well, because it's very similar to music. 'Cause it's like a story.
Yeah. You
have kind of like, okay, this is the theme, this is the character, come up with something that kind of goes along with this. Anything that's like lets you sort of do what is good for the music is great for me, you know.
Did you perceive a different type of mindset, or like what is art scene like in India versus America?
Actually it's well, I haven't been back since 2010. Like when I moved, it was 2002, but they're very heavily art oriented in India. Like
right.
it's very important over there.
Right. Like
more important than probably here. Like they actually have like, you know, you can actually make a good career doing art, and there's a lot of like events and things like that. But yeah, I would say, like I even remember being in school over there, and I entered in a couple of art competitions, and I remember like winning like third place in one of them or something like that. And it was one of those things it was like things like India's independence or something. I did this like weird, like Gandhi's hands coming from the sky or something, and I was like, oh, this is not gonna do. And then it's like, oh, you won. I'm like, all right, that's cool. But yeah, definitely. I would say India, the importance of art is a lot. It's more in their DNA, you know, because, you know, you got all the architecture, it's more respected, I guess, you know, than it is here, you know.
Well, because here's the thing. You have like your modern day artist, you have your artiste. I feel like you have hobbyists that like to call themselves artists. I get a lot of shit for this, and I am very, very like point blank about it. My father was always the type to say, I am always correct, I am never right. Someone who is right has no need for new information, and they've made up their mind. Someone who's correct bases it on fact and is always open to new information to create a new narrative. And the thing is when I see people that do hobby work for like tattooing or for painting or this and that, and, you know, I was telling the girl who came in today where she was like, you know, I can't draw this thing. And I said, cool. What are you having trouble with? Well, this, but it doesn't, I just can't draw this part of it. Well, do you know how to draw any kind of birds? No? Okay, then just study birds. Go and buy a $5 sketchbook, a $10 sketchbook, and just fill it up with birds. Let them be as shitty as you want. But like learn, and do things. And I think that's the hard part is here you have the idea that it's okay to be shitty as long as it's your style. Versus other places are like, you can be expressive, but like, where is your direction? Ambition with no direction means nothing. And that is the hard part of why I feel like people don't really take art seriously. And why everyone now, of course, with social media, needs to be an influencer first and artist second. Because the idea of selling yourself is so much more. Versus like where you go to India or like when I go and visit Japan. You go there and art is a performing art, but the skill is the performance, not the hype of the idea of skill. Here it's how you look and then show in a gallery versus over there what you show in a gallery. And I think that is a huge thing where not everybody is good. Not everybody is special. And that's okay, because I think when you are honest with yourself, if you are good and are special or not, it gives you purpose. It gives you a direction to be like, fuck, I really suck at perspective. Okay, well then I'm going to go to somebody who's great at perspective and ask, like, Kiren, would you please help me out with this? Now I can learn something and grow. But it's become such a commodity to be called an artist these days. And it sounds pretentious, right? Like, oh, you are not as good as I. No, that's not what I mean. I mean, it's more of people, like, there's a guy I grew up with that does art, and the dude is a fucking hack. I'll say it to the fucking stars and back. The dude's a piece of shit. And this dude bullies other people into being like, your art's not good, bro. That's not going to sell. And I've seen some tremendously gifted people that have skill just as great as yours who are like, yeah, you're right, it's dumb. And they stop. And it's been 10 years and they will never pick up another pencil because they trust that person. And that person, I've wiped my ass and has seen better images. I'm like, why are my parents fighting? Not that I look, but the idea of it is like, I feel that that's the hard part is when you can go out into the world and see how they treat art, how they treat the idea of like expressing yourself versus the popularity of it. It encourages you to take more risk and be like, wow, maybe I do want to try this. Being an artist isn't about being great. It's about being accountable. It's about being risky. It's about being you. And if you can't be those things and someone else is influencing that outside of like what you really need to learn, I think that's where it gets lost, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I think the motivation and actually just putting yourself out there. I've noticed a lot of people are afraid of that, of putting their work out there because they're going to get judged. Oh, you suck or whatever. And I think we all had that like when we started out, but the few people that actually just keep doing it regardless of what people tell them. And I've been told that as well.
Of course, same here.
I remember I had this was like at a party back in like 2002, and I was showing. This was when I was doing these really, really bad I would get like Maxim images and Photoshop and make them Cradle of Filth covers. And I remember showing this person, and he worked for some video game company at the time, and he's like, "Oh, well, that's okay, but check what I did." And he showed me he rendered a motorcycle and this and then. I was like, "Yeah, that looks awesome." It's but he was totally complete asshole. And normally some people would just be like, okay, like you said, just fucking quit. But for me, it's any shitty artwork that I make it a point to say, okay, well, this artwork is shitty. The next one, I'm going to try to improve on what makes this shitty and gradually just get better. And I mean, I still look at my artwork from last year and I go, oh God, I fucking hate that.
Yeah.
It's just I
did a tattoo today and I'm like, why the fuck am I doing this? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
you're never out of that stage. And I think a lot of artists wonder because it's, I had posted something a while back about this, but it's the idea of, again, something my father had told me is there's never an age you'll ever be an adult, right? You're just a child with more responsibilities. And I think as an artist that applies very, very well, because there's never a point where you're like, I've made it. I am the artist. Like fucking light coming out of your eyes and shit. No, I don't think there's ever going to be that point. You're always going to hate something or think something of it. It's how you overcome it. Like you said, fuck, I really suck at perspective, or shit, I really suck at eyes or legs or arms, or foreground versus background. And then you're at, what can I fix for the next one? And I feel like that's where tactily for me, I have to redraw the whole thing, right? Go get a piece of tracing paper or something. Digitally, it's hard because I can just move something and I'm like, cool, that looks better, but I don't have to redraw it. and I think that there is a place for that in the professional world, because again, time equals money equals reputation equals totally. Portfolio. I feel like us as artists individually, that's when I sit down. I'm like, no, I have to physically draw this. But I use Procreate as well. Someone's like, can we move it this way? And you just flip it, and they're like, oh my God, it's perfect. To go, I know.
It's like you flip it and flip it back to the same image. It's like, oh, that looks great.
Yeah, it's like when somebody wants to get tattooed. It's a little bit big. And then we go to the photocopy machine, and we just literally print another one and go, it's 2% smaller. It's perfect. And you're like, oh, fuck me. But so here's the thing. You work with a lot of modeling programs as well.
Yeah.
When you work with stuff like that, what really got you into that as you started building, can you elaborate on what you actually use for some of your art?
Okay. So in the beginning, I would kind of just use stock images. I still use stock images, but mainly for like backgrounds, textures, sometimes little floral pattern things, whatever. But back in the day, I would just get I would go through all the stock images, find a good image of say a female with good lighting, and then I would kind of build the art around that, or the idea would go, she would look cool, like covered in fire or whatever. And then it got to the point where I was just like, I was getting tired of being limited to like what I was finding. And I would also do my own photos as well. I would sometimes include myself, my wife, but it just got to the point where I was just like nitpicking every little like lighting choice. But then I first started with Poser, which was kind of similar to Daz 3D, but it's like the earlier version of Daz.
Shout out Avril Lavigne.
Yes. But it got me into the whole like, okay, I can pose the figures the way I want them, I can light them the way I want them, and then kind of Daz. It's a good base because I can purchase the models. I can kind of morph the faces to kind of make them kind of unique. I can purchase like little, say if I need to do I want a chick wearing like a armor or something. I can buy an armor set from Daz, and I can kind of modify it a bit. And there's just like, I think it's just the custom ability is what kind of turned me on to like 3D programs and like Daz and all that stuff, because people, I've seen artwork like on book covers, and it's like, oh, I've seen that stock photo on like Adobe Stock or Shutterfly or whatever, and it's like it's like it disconnects you. It's like, okay, that's obviously a stock photo, and it's not very unique. And like that was kind of where I kind of started using more 3D programs, so I'm able to make them more unique. And so the client is like, okay, what they're getting is just for them, and yeah, I mean, I love it. I've been kind of messing with ZBrush a lot too. That's kind of more of a modeling, like basically like digital clay.
Yeah.
And that's been fun. It's frustrating at the same time though.
And it's one of the most, it's amazing, right? Like how Adobe itself is, there's a solution for everything. They think of everything. And for someone like me who hates using Adobe products, aside from Lightroom.
Okay.
I love it for photo editing. It's like, God fucking damn it. Just make it easy. And then they're like, oh, you don't like difficult shit? That's crazy. Here's ZBrush, fat boy. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my God. But once you get into the lighting aspect, when you get into stuff, for anybody that uses an iPad or uses a tablet in general, look up Magic Poser. It is a free app that you can use to pose things and use light and so forth. Great tool to have, because I use it for a lot of my covers. But I feel like it's you get a lot of flack these days for hearing how digital art how old are you?
I'm 41.
Oh,
Yeah.
fuck, you age well.
Yeah.
I'm 35. So we both grew up in the age before computers were like necessary, and then we grew with technology. And digital art was seen as a form of art that was like, wow, you could do that. Then we hit this really rough curve with, well, is it really art once AI started coming out? And then you have the modeling programs. And I feel like when you look at those differentiations, there's something about with AI versus like actual programs where you're trying to figure things out that unfortunately, like as it starts to emulate things faster, you can't tell the difference anymore. But you can tell, like you said, when you're looking at like the, what do they call it? Millennium Explosia or something, I believe. Remember the old encyclopedias where everything on Windows 2000 was like a whale and a window and a dog.
Yeah.
It was this type of art that was really synonymous with a lot of Swedish artists at the time that were huge into like, it's everything in a box of chocolates. Then where the fuck are the chocolates? I'm a fat guy and I don't see any. But you saw that, and it was like a really big regurgitation of like the world at your fingertips. Britannia, what was it? Britannia Encyclopedia or whatever. But then you get into AI, and things look gorgeous, but it doesn't really look like there's a purpose to it. I feel that's why I like what you do, is because there's a specific piece that I love, that it's a very wide piece that has the illuminated like goddess.
Oh yeah, the figure where it's kind of like lit up with the bird or the crow coming out of, yeah.
Yes, and then it's just an extremely wide in the woods. And to me, I'm like, fuck, that Snymead, Jerry Savola, fucking Sandra, what's her name? Anixon, I believe it's the way you say her name.
Okay.
But all great storytellers that when they put perspective, a Swedish tilt, or they do this wide perspective, you wonder like, what the fuck is that? That's so cool. And I think AI art becomes so literal with things that it doesn't allow you to be curious about stuff unless you prompt it to. And that still takes a creative mind. What I love about what you do with modeling and what you do with your art in general, you take something that doesn't really have reason to the normal person, but it intrigues you enough to be like, but why? And you tell that story with your characters and the way that you, especially the way you portray women. I think in a lot of metal albums and a lot of different music albums, you see women always being portrayed as bimbos, right? Like, oh, look at my tits. I'm a 300-pound 6'1" guy. I got tits too, okay? Hire me! But I feel like when you do it, you're showing like a goddess, or you're showing an entity, or you're showing something that's vulnerable or strong. You have a really good understanding of not just figure and form, but of storytelling. Where does that come from, and what do you really think you do well that you see AI doesn't do well?
Well, yeah, like kind of mentioned before, like Boris Vallejo definitely was, inspiring, because his women were always kind of very muscular, very strong. And, I have obviously I have huge respect for women in general. Like I've always had big, like strong women in my life, including my wife, my mom, my sister-in-laws, and all that stuff. So I have a respect for women. And yeah, it's also a realistic take on it as well. Like, I always kind of like try to give a little bit of more like, meatiness to when I'm like when I'm kind of rendering or whatever. I like
Absolutely.
to kind of, so because it adds more realism to me. Like imperfections are always I'm always drawn to imperfections.
Yeah.
Even like when I draw like male, or when I work with male models, whatever, like in DAZ, I always like make him emaciated, because I'm kind of like emaciated almost, like I'm very thin, but for some reason that kind of, you see all the little tendons and the ribs and all that. It's very interesting to me. Like it kind of adds more character. But Shit, I think I lost the my train of thought. What's the question? Or no, what the initial question of like, oh, what makes it different from AI? Yeah, I mean, I have my own thoughts on AI. I'm actually gonna do a podcast with a friend of mine, Claudio Bergaman, who's another illustrator. He did Judas Priest's last album cover, and yeah, he's great, amazing artist. But we've been talking. We talked over the phone actually a couple of days ago about it. We're gonna do a podcast just talking about AI. And
what is your podcast so people can know?
Oh, I don't know it yet. That's
okay.
It was more of just like I'm actually getting other artists to kind of join. So I already asked 3 of my friends who are artists, and they're gonna kind of join the podcast. But
nice.
So it's not out yet, but I'll definitely let you know.
We'll get to your other socials, but with AI, what is your opinion on AI first?
I mean,
because that's the hot topic,
dude. I mean. To go from like 5 years ago, where I was just struggling to find clients 5 years ago, right. You know what I mean? But I wasn't worried because I had a job and yada, yada, yada. But now that I'm like freelance, it's like even more, it's like a black cloud over your head, because it's like there are bands using AI to create their artwork now. And it's just a matter of fact. I mean, it's just going to happen. I personally don't fucking like it. I think it looks really shitty. Even like as a idea creator, I think it's just sort of like, we all have the potential to kind of come up with our own ideas. We don't need fucking AI to like show us, oh, that's how it'll look. I mean, just watch a movie, look at some books or whatever. I don't know. It's just like I have a lot of people who are like friends who are really talented artists who are like all for it. They're just using it all the time, and I think it's part of I think they're trying to like they're trying to get on the train a little bit, not be left behind. But for me, it's like they're already doing video now, like prompts, 1 minute video. I mean, it's fucking amazing. I'm not gonna lie, it looks great to like the untrained artistic eye, like for stock photos, for stock footage. It's very handy, but just like there's such a large amount of people that like depend on their careers as artists, like movies. You got there's all kinds of stuff.
There's a whole thing right now of how they're firing in droves a tremendous amount of animators, and Tyler Perry was the first one to say it. He's like, we were gonna do like a $400 million expansion on his movie studio, and he was like, not anymore. Because he doesn't want to have to travel anywhere to do snow or do this or do that. So now he can just generate his actors in that environment. And I think that's the hard part, right? Let's look at so for anyone that doesn't know, Kiren has a channel called
Kiren Digital illustration. It's on YouTube. Just type in Kiren Digital.
And you also have a review channel that you do.
Oh, yeah. I do movie reviews, fly-by-night reviews.
Hey. And you're a big moviegoer. I have not talked to you on the other podcast about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the amount of films coming out. You saw Madam Web, did you not?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Baby. Oh. Now, here's the example of Madam Web. At no point, even if you need to hold IP, should you have made it that shitty to hold the IP in general. We talk about this all the time, where shout out to Ricky Spanish and everybody in the chat. Thank you for joining us. I will read some of your guys' comments right now. Sorry, I can't see my screen that small. But Ricky Spanish had come in to talk to us here at the Sanctorum, and he was like, yeah, I'm not really a DC guy, but A, B, and C. And I showed him Tim Miller's DC Universe Online trailer. For anyone that has not seen it, have you?
No.
I would love to see you and Dom do a genuine review of that, because talk about strong storytelling and just a fucking gnarly ass thing for a video game intro. The ODST intro, where everyone's making fun of it for Helldivers and so forth right now, but the way it impacts you. And I feel like a lot of that comes from pain. A lot of that comes from experience. It comes from gain and loss and happiness and joy and sorrow. You know, like I was talking to my wife last night when we were watching Murder from the Building, and there is this song Meryl Streep does that she plays, and it's a C minor to D7, and it's called the grief note, and it's whenever you hear it, it's sad, and you can tell somebody wrote that, you can tell somebody sung it, you can tell somebody created these things, and you see the fucking gnarliness of in the DC Universe Online one. They kill Wonder Woman.
Oh, I think I heard about that. Yeah, that was kind of going online.
And Superman just fucking lobotomizes the fuck out of Black Adam, which I wish you could do to the real Rock. But you see why that stuff works, because it's written by Paul Dini, one of the most legendary writers of all time when it comes to DC Comics. Point. When you start seeing stuff like that and you see how the grandeur of that thing can hold, AI has a really hard time emulating emotion because it emulates what's popular. And that's the hard part with Madam Web, right? It's just things generated. So, like, you want to know who the real fucking villain of Madam Web is? Pepsi. Holy shit,
yeah,
dude, the fucking product placement.
Yeah,
My fucking eyes. Pepsi Cola, why? I said that they probably show that to fucking Coca-Cola training employees. We're like, if you drink Pepsi, this is going to happen to you and the Spider-Verse. You know, but my point is like, when you get people that don't care about art, artistic integrity, artistic storytelling, or just in general, the human fucking nature of grief. When you can't hit that grief note and you can't experience why it's okay to enjoy something or why it's not, your art kind of falls flat. And AI can emulate a lot of things, but when you have the people prompting it who have no fucking experience artistically how to write or make something, that's where it becomes hard, right? Because you can do that. That's why I love your artwork. Your artwork genuinely tells a story that I have no fucking clue what it is. I don't know what the fuck. You have this.
Honestly,
fairy.
I don't know either. Like, I mean, this, like, right here, this is actually my art. I'm actually going to sell t-shirts soon, but yeah, this is just kind of like,
yeah.
I just fucking, woke up in the morning and I was like, just in Dad's like, oh, this pose looks good. How would she look on a, brimstone fucking flames? And I was like, very Derek Riggs, Iron Maiden kind of. I mean,
absolutely.
Hence the.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to see you take a crack at the whole cyberpunk stuff.
Oh yeah, I've done a couple like kind of cyberpunk stuff, but not very proud of them anymore.
but that's my point is like, because whether they have a story or not, what I think I love about it is I can come up with something. Me, I'm a good storyteller. Like, I love writing. I love stories. I love this and that. A lot of times people are like, oh my God, it's half of that shit probably ain't true. Oh, it is. It's just my inflections that make them sound fucking bullshit. I just know how to speak. But truth be told, going back to the AI thing, I've had artists jump on it and be like, people are, you can't change the future, man. You got to jump on it. And I agree. There are some great uses for AI, but I don't think AI can be replaced. Like, I'll put it this way. I said this to somebody earlier, and I said that if you had when wagons were like the thing and buggies, and then somebody came out with the first car, Ford, people were like, you're gonna kill the fucking wagon industry, you know what I mean? And now the Amish are fucking killing it, that's all. They got a monopoly on that shit. Somebody fucking check on them. But I mean, because of that, you could still hand anybody a car that goes 300 miles an hour and they wouldn't know what the fuck to do with it besides smash into a wall. Shout out Paul Walker. But I didn't kill him. It's not my fault. But
it's been long enough. It's been a few years.
Fucking Paul Wall. He's the real Paul Wall. But I mean, you know what I mean? Is like, if you put something that needs to be told something in the hands of somebody who doesn't know what to tell it, you don't get authentic art. You don't get something that's there. But then you start looking at like TikTok. You start looking at people like, fucking artist ain't a real job. It ain't this, it ain't that. And like, you get these arguments. I feel like it's hard because you can't stop AI just as much as you can't stop a digital artist from recreating something where you work in a medium I don't know, and I work in a medium that you do know, and then we both excel in two different ways. But I don't look at you as any less of an artist, and I don't look at myself as any less of an artist. We can work together, or I can admire your art as I do. And I feel like that's the hard part, right? Is like, what do you think you find the even medium with AI, especially as a digital artist? Well, not predominantly, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, I will admit, because recently Photoshop has a generative fill option now, or like, yeah. And I do the only time I use AI, because I do kind of use AI in that aspect in Photoshop, is to because sometimes I'll like have an image like I did one for an album cover recently, and I needed to have more of the background filled out so I could like put the logo in properly. And instead of like going, oh, I gotta fucking, shrink everything down, and I use the generative fill to kind of fill in the blanks basically. So it used my already made art, and it kind of just added an extra 1 inch on all sides, so I was able to crop it better. And yeah. I did that with like my YouTube thumbnails as well for Fly By Night. In that sense, I think it's great, because it's like it's using your art, it's just extending it,
right?
And it's making it practical so you can put text or whatever, but you're not depending on it solely. Like when I was talking to Claudio, and it's like, okay, what happens? Okay, you generate this amazing AI artwork and you present it to a client, and the client's like, oh well, I don't want that person in the thing. Can you make her kind of turning to the right, or any kind of like very subtle changes? I mean, I'm not saying that AI is not there yet, but it probably eventually will get there. But it's most of the time when you get sold AI artwork, it's like as is, like there's no changes. It's like, okay, this is it. This is like what you're gonna get, and there's nothing like I can't repeat this again, basically. And that's the big problem, is like you can't tweak AI yet. So I mean,
yeah, and I feel like that's the thing too, is where it's going to improve, right? Like you're never going to hit a moment where you absolutely can rely on anything, because I feel like a lot of people thought when Photoshop became a thing, it was like, well, what are you going to do as a real photographer? I have always wanted one of those what do they call it, like the Masamotos, or the old 16 by 16 cameras.
Oh yeah,
and I've always wanted one. They were like $200. Then fucking TikTok got it popular. Now they're back to $1,500. Well, God damn it, Mom! And it's funny because everything comes back to analog. I talk about this a lot with some of my art, my tattoo friends, who, like, in the world of art, a lot of fine artists are trying to become tattooers, and they're failing because they don't realize that you're like, Joseph again had said this, where he was like, you're playing football and we play rugby. The mechanics are different. The players and the type of ball are the same, but they're just, the mechanics are different. So you can't really actually revolve around that and have that mindset that you can just jump into it. It does not work the same. And it's the same thing for tattoo artists. You can't just go into a fine art gallery and be like, oh, I'm going to fucking ruin this place. And then it's like, fucking put your Ed Hardy shorts back on, gay boy. And I feel like that is the real dilemma, right? Is you start getting people who they look at what is capable and what is not capable. And everybody wants to have this, well, if you're a real artist, you're going to do this. If you do this, you do. My whole thing was like, I look at vinyl. Right now, everybody in the world is going to be accustomed to digital art, AI, so forth. But every fucking generation absolutely needs to feel like they are different than the predecessor. So what are they going to do? You have to work hard. I have to work hard. We'll be in our 50s. We'll be in our 60s. But there's going to be this weird thing of like, oh, dude, check out what I just made. Like this amazing artwork. The not the drones. What are they called? The robotic arms that are now sculpting.
Oh, yeah.
Replicas and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And you're going to get that one dickhead, probably a Rothschild, right? Who's like, I have an original art that was painted by somebody. How funny that you would watch him like Demolition Man, and they'd be like, what? Yeah, let's go blow this guy away. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
The idea of having something that was absolutely handmade is unique. The need for somebody who is going to be a physical artist will never go out. It just has to have its ebb and flow. People want flip phones again. People love fucking vinyl. People love older cars. People always revert back to something old because people overcomplicate everything, and then they get burnt on the overcomplication of things. Then they go to the one person that can absolutely do it. So I have that conversation of, don't worry about it. It is rough. It is. But if you master your craft now versus bitching about it, you'll be in 15 years set better than anyone. You know, and that's hard because you don't have that foresight. But we do have hindsight. In hindsight, if I would have just listened to myself and not thrown away all my Pokemon cards, if I would have not thrown away all my
my kid fucking collects those too, and he's just like, oh, that's worth $1 million now. I was like, because he watches all those YouTube videos.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like, that's the thing is like, even though it was like, went through the depressing state of like AI and like, I'm still not going to stop creating,
Right.
And that's the important thing. I know a lot of people who are just like, oh, I'm not even going to create art anymore because this is like, why? They're like, for me, it's part of who I am. It's creating, because that's the one thing that AI doesn't let you have is it's the process that you enjoy. It's not the end product,
Yeah.
It's the problem solving. Like if you were to say just, a tattoo was just a machine that you just put the layer, kind of like Starship Troopers.
Oh yeah.
It was just a machine that just did the.
They're trying to do that.
That to me that's fucking the stupidest, because like you said, it's the experience. It's talking with your tattooist. It's getting to know them. It's like dealing with everything. It's all the little like intricacies of that, that make it special.
I know how to break AI, and I'm going to just say it right now. I'm going to ask AI, please show a photo of my parents loving me, and then it's a Skynet goes offline. I'm all, why? I'm all, please, oh god damn it!
It's like that's too complex. For them.
Yeah, exactly. Fucking Zuckerberg's like, you fat son of a bitch. How?
Yeah, I mean, God.
But you're right. I mean, because there's people. I have a cousin who absolutely like makes the joke about, well, wow, they're making robots that can tattoo people and do this and do that, and people now being able to, like, there's such an oversaturation on it. And the reason why I'm very particular on people learning tattooing is because it's permanent. Okay, this isn't Control Z. This isn't some tacos or a fucking drink. This isn't some fucking paperwork. This isn't a pallet of sodas that if you fuck up, there's another chance. This is real people, real consequences. And, you have ignorant tattooing now, which is like, it's really shitty, but they're like, you can't tell me that because you're a gatekeeper and you're fucking stupid, but don't call me stupid because that's not the way to be. And it's like, wait a minute, that's the double entendre. But, I feel like the hard part with that is, the cousin that was having this conversation with me had always been somebody that worked in tech, had always gone to like great schools and very intelligent. But I asked them, I said, when your kid grows up, my nephew, do you think college is really the way for them? And his face kind of sours and goes, no, like he's got to get into a trade, I don't know if you watch South Park at all, but I
haven't watched South Park in like probably like 20 something years or something. It's been a while.
Do yourself a favor with you and Fly By Night. Please watch the episode of when, all the people with degrees need handymen. It's a special. And the idea of it is that like Randy can't fix the hinge on his fucking oven, and his wife keeps fucking trying to do it. He's, I'm working on it, Sharon. And so they go to Home Depot, and it's a bunch of them. I can give you geology. Just work on my oven. I can broadcast the news. Just fix my tiles in my shower. And then there's this fucking, every handyman's truck that pulls up is solid gold, is high rims. And there's this Mexican guy that pulls up. He goes, hey, why don't you guys like get out of here? You're making it look cheap, and like how it's basically such a great social commentary and the whole idea of like, the stuff. But why does any of this matter? Because again, it goes back to the idea of where our generation was really pushed into, like, if you go to college, you will be guaranteed with a good life. I believe that there was a time for that, but here's the thing. One of my favorite instructors of all time, his name is Mike Johnston. For anybody that is a drummer and knows him, phenomenal online teacher. also does a podcast called Drum. Please check it out. And he taught me this a long time ago. He goes, we as artists, you can be a musician, you could be a writer, you can be a juggler, shit, you could fucking be a chef. He goes, we have an advantage that no athlete will ever have. Athletes absolutely have a peak in their performance. They will get to this crescendo where they are the fucking best they are, and then their body starts to break down. And then it slowly descends to where they're at. You have the time, you have literally a quarter to a half of your life mastering this craft. And then you get to the apex, and then you spend the rest of your life reflecting on that. And your brain still learns, but your body can't keep up. He goes, but us as artists, musicians and more, there is no crescendo. You create the crescendo. Your body will keep up. Unless you're like a guy who likes to fucking play piano and starts running and you end up in a wheelchair, that's your fault. But I mean, like, the idea is like, he's right. And I feel it's the same way with when we start talking about how the world is working. If a machine can do tattoos, that's fine. People want cheap, people want this, people want that. But there's always going to be that one person, especially coming from a person who understands the Tao, who understands Polynesian, who understands Japanese work. And immediately it's like, I need to have something done by somebody who respects a craft, because somebody always needs to feel connected to something. And I feel like that's hard. The hard part is where you no longer are an artist, you're a craftsman. You are somebody that absolutely lives and dies for your thing. And that is the hard part, is some people just like, I just like doing it for the fun of it. There's nothing wrong with that either. There's really nothing wrong with that. But we're talking about two calibers here, right? We're talking about somebody who's trying to make a living for their family and battling some guy that's like, but I could just do it really quick in the AI. You know what I mean? And it's like, are you sure you made that? Oh, I drew it all myself. That's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy, man, because that looks like Frylock from Aqua Teen Hunger Force. No. His name is Fry Jock, other guy.
Actually, my old coworker from my last gig, when I worked at the beer distributor, he actually knew the guy who did the voice of one of the Aqua Teen Hunger Force. He grew up with them in Ohio or something. Yeah. Anyway,
so let me ask you this: what has to be probably your 3 artists that you absolutely have to say have been major influences on you, and what's a artist that you absolutely don't understand?
Okay, so 3
artists that have always influenced you.
Number 1, Travis Smith. I don't know if you know who he is. He's done a bunch of album covers. He did a lot of Opeth's album covers. He did Avenged Sevenfold album cover. I think it was Nightmare. This band Nevermore. This is when I was introduced with them. He kind of like is very similar to Dave McKean, which is another artist that is like one of my most important. He kind of like pioneered the whole Photoshop photo manipulation angle, which I kind of was drawn to, because when I looked at his shit, I was like, I remember being in India and like opening the CD, and it's like, this was like 2001, and I was just like, well, how the fuck, like, is this a painting? Is this a, like, I didn't even know what the hell I was looking at, because it was just so, like, my mind was so blown.
Right.
And then I realized Dave McKean, who did, you know, Arkham, Asylum, whatever, he did those graphic novels, but he also did like Sandman, but he dabbled in digital. He still does, but he does a lot of Photoshop, photo montage stuff. And it was the same thing. It was just like, is it a photo? Is it a fucking painting? Is it, you know, collage or whatever? And those always really stuck with me.
Especially the Sandman series, because you're looking at it and it's like, I feel like he's doing paper mache, and then he's painting on top of it, and then he'll do some splatter, and then it looks like it's real but not. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing?
Oh yeah, well the the Sandman, a few of the covers he actually did, they were like, you know, 5x3, like basically like installed, like, you know, had frames, it had like little jars. I mean, it was like a whole process, you know.
Like the I Spy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kinda like, yeah. Number 3, I would definitely have to say, like, you know, like Boris, for instance. I always go back to him because, you know, you know, again, like my brother was way into like D&D back in the day. Like I never really got into it, but the art always spoke to me, the fantasy art. Just this is like this almost like looks like photorealistic, you know, but with paints, you know, and I was always like blown away by that. Like how can you paint that fucking, it's almost like otherworldly kind of stuff, whatever. But definitely that's always kind of stuck with me, even though Frazetta I think was better than Boris.
Right.
Boris always kind of like, his stuff was always smooth and very clean, and I always had a kind of a connection with that. And then the one that I'm not really sure about. That's a good question.
You're all Brushes of Doom. All right, good night, everybody.
You know what? I can't really name like a particular, because to be honest, I like abstract art. I like those paintings where it's just a fucking bunch of like paint splatter with some like texture added and little scribbles. And some people say that's not art, but I actually absolutely love that kind of stuff. Like it's very expressionist, you know. And who do I not understand? AI artists who came out in the last year, who are like killing it on social media, and I'm like,
oh yeah,
not even fucking hitting 1,000 followers, and they're like 250K for rendering shit like every day. They're like coming out with new stuff, and it's just like, it pisses me off.
There's an individual from Spain who always blocks anyone who says anything, but he's taking Gaston Guillet from France. He was an old Art Nouveau artist.
Okay.
And you can tell his stuff a mile away. Everybody emulates it when it comes to like a fucking cheesecake factory. You know, you're like, oh my God, that's beautiful. Guillet, you're Guillet. And so you look at the dude's work, and it's just iconic. Then this dickhead comes in, and Jean-Claude Van Dipshit starts AI generating it for tattoo artists to tattoo. And he's like, oh, make sure to give me credit. And he just puts a tiny little thing in the corner like it's his. And how you can tell it's AI generated is because when you blow it up, it's all pixelated.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and he doesn't know his right or correct DPI. Even if it didn't, you would see the imperfections and everything. So a bunch of tattoo artists started just taking it and tattooing it and then putting their stamp on it. And the guy was like, "It's impossible. You can't do this." And and people were like, "Fuck you, dude. This isn't your work." And I think that's one of the funniest forms of the universe correcting itself. What happens to the thief who has perfected his craft when other people have learned to steal just as well as him, and they steal from him? Nothing, because he spent his entire time stealing, never learning how to conserve. If he knew how to conserve, he would conserve himself to fucking doing better art versus just taking from other people. And it doesn't feel good when they're the other way, and they go crying and this and that, and it's like, you know,
because they don't know the feeling.
They don't.
They're just like, they've
they
always
want the information.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's digital endorphins, so to speak. Yeah, I feel like that is such a huge thing that people don't talk about. Is like, what are the downsides of AI? What are the upsides of AI? I had a conversation with a friend who was like, you know, when I was doing 3D modeling for video games, like that's what I went to school for. And I had 4 years of school and 4 years of debt. And nobody felt bad for me when they came out with this brand new program that you would just upload an image of something and it would model it for you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he was like, I spent all 4 years for fucking what? And that is when it became such a interesting observation, when he was like, I don't feel bad for anybody that is affected by AI because nobody felt bad for me. I'll use it to my advantage, but it won't stop my physical ability. Phenomenal tattoo artist. Like, dude can paint and draw like no one's business. But he's like, fuck it. I'm not going to go buy a $300 honey mask. Honey mask lit this way. And it's funny because it'll regenerate a honey mask. And he's like, perfect. Snake wrapping around a rose. And I've seen a lot of tattooers using it for references where they're just using it for composition purposes. But they're not publishing that. They're using that and rendering it in their own style. And to me, that's where it becomes interesting. Like you said, when you're trying to edit something for Fly By Night or here and there, is it bad when it doesn't benefit you? That's the weird conversation people want to have, right? So do you think that AI art is bad? Blanket statement.
I mean, it's bad in the sense of when it's used to just like when someone has no like I can respect that rendering something to kind of draw from or get an idea, even though I feel like just looking at stuff gives me enough ideas. But if you're going to use AI, I'd rather it be used in that way than just being like, hey, this is the product. Like when it's just, this is the product, this is what you're going to get. That to me is just like, that person has no artistic ability who's doing that. It's just someone's fucking nephew or, hey, do you know how to use this program? We need a new album cover. Okay. Here you go. And it annoys me because it's like if I were to use AI, like I guarantee you would not know it was fucking AI because I would edit that shit. Because I know I can point out like the little fucking imperfections because like a lot of artists like like you'd probably know that too. Like you have an eye for what looks right, what doesn't look right.
Why does everything you produce have a shocker in it? It's my artistic freedom. That's what it is. AI's just fucking me with fucking shocker. No, you're right. But a trained eye can tell.
Yeah.
You said it perfectly where you could look at some things and like, that's a stock photo. And it pulls you out because you're behind the curtain, right? Does Hollywood seem the same to somebody when you know how that stunt was done or this was done or the rendering was done? Corridor Crew is one of my favorite things to watch.
Oh yeah, I love that. I love the channel.
Yeah, absolutely, really cool. Because you learn so much, whether you're a digital artist or not. You learn a lot about art and the different things that they take into account. Braveheart was one of them, right? How they rendered a dragon for Braveheart versus how they rendered a dragon for Game of Thrones, and how back then they didn't have the capability or the foresight to be like, we really should add gray and fucking black into this, but just not even black. Like, let's use a lamp black that's a green base. So for anyone that doesn't know, you have your grayscale, and then you have what's called a narrow value palette, meaning that you have from 1 to 5 how dark it gets. 1 being the lightest, 5 being the darkest. You can use that for colors. So rather than just using solid black, you would use a green base or a blue based black. Green and orange make brown, so you'd use a green base. There you go. Very simple theory. By doing that, you get so much more out of this thing. And because of that, it makes it look more real. Now, obviously, they only had so much that they could do at the time. But then you start thinking about, like, time and place, right? When you look at The Frighteners, one of the best fucking movies I've ever seen in my life when it comes to CGI, especially Peter Jackson before Lord of the Rings, that movie helped prompted what would eventually become Adobe. Because of the producers on there are the brothers who
I think one of the brothers ended up working for Lucasfilm.
Yes. And they
stole something, or I forgot his last name. But anyway, yeah.
And they basically created Adobe. And you look at that, and here's my question. Why do you think, especially as a film buff, this is a perfect question for you. So Forrest Gump, The Frighteners, and batteries not included, everything else, from practical to digital, everything looks so much better back then because of, like, you're also filming on film. So it can hide a lot of the imperfections, but I do believe you had craftsmen and women that were absolutely busting their ass to make it as real as possible, versus now you're watching fucking Supernatural and it's like, there's a picture of me and my grandma, and it's like the shittiest Photoshop you've ever seen, where people don't really give a shit anymore. Do you think that has to do more with the craftsmanship of who was doing it back then, or is it because the quality has gotten so real with technology, it's really easy to tell buffs, or have we gotten smarter?
No, I think honestly, because like using Jurassic Park as an example, a lot of those shots that they used are ground level shots. They're realistic shots like a movie would do. But the problem is now with CGI is that directors can do any kind of fucking aerial shot, any kind of like going through. So like the moment you get complicated with the movements of the camera, it automatically takes you out of it. It looks artificial. Jurassic Park still looks amazing because like all that shit was just like in camera. I mean, they used a lot of practical as well, but it was all just like you were actually seeing a fucking, a dinosaur walking, as opposed to like, you watch like Jurassic World and all those newer movies. Everything looks, it looks very good. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like the fucking effects are amazing, but the way it's filmed is a big part of it too. It's like, because back then you're limited to how you can move the camera, so you had to work within those limitations. But now you have like no limitations, and then it just makes everything look fucking artificial. I mean, I think that's the problem with.
And I also feel it's the passion, right? Like, look at, obviously you did. Why am I asking, like, you don't watch fucking movies, right? You have a fucking movie show. Godzilla -1.
I haven't seen that yet.
Damn.
Yeah, no, like I wanted
Boo
to see
this man.
I saw the 98 Godzilla back in like yeah, no, I gotta see that shit. Yeah.
It was absolutely phenomenal. You could tell it looks clunky in some areas, but like Shin Godzilla was something I absolutely did not really care for. Everyone was like, it's so fucking amazing. And I'm like, he looks stupid. But when you look at the artwork that was created for it, promotional or storyboard or anything, it's just gnarly. -1 was such a small budget, small team. You have people that give a real fucking shit. They got nominated. They didn't even win the damn thing. And you saw how these artists in this studio really interacted with each other. And they were just, they celebrated the nomination, not the win. And to me, that's a real set of artists. Going back to the beginning of the conversation, where working solo versus working in an environment where you can feed off each other,
Yeah.
how important that is, that server to server, this makes money, versus artist to artist, this makes real. Like, this absolutely makes you feel something. That looks good. This looks good, because you're emphasizing a story that you're telling versus something that you are just imitating, and I feel like that's really where a lot of times you're going to get change. Like Pixar is a really good example of artists, right, that have always used computers, has always used the cutting edge technology. But every movie they come out with lately, it's like, ugh.
Well, I mean, it's because like when Toy Story came out, that was like, fucking groundbreaking, because it was like, holy shit, this is like amazing. But now, like, have you noticed, like, every like animated movies these days are all computer generated? There's no hand animation,
artistry to it.
Yeah, so it's almost become like the standard, I guess. And like now, when like, yeah, I'm the same way. It's like, I'm not like a huge Disney person. Like, I mean, the last movie that really impressed me was like Lion King, and that was like when I was like fucking 12. So it's like, again, I'm not really, but in terms of just like, it used to be an event, like when Pixar would come out with a movie and like everybody would want to see it. But now it's just like every fucking studio has a, animation movie that's, I mean, like, look at like the what do you call Despicable Me?
Yes.
I mean, honestly, I enjoy those movies like a lot, dude. Like the Minions or whatever. I mean, it's stupid, but it's like they're funny. I mean,
it's the right cast.
Yeah.
There's a charm to it. Shrek is a great example. Shrek to me is a movie that absolutely fucking kills it in every possible way. But it's not just the animation, it's the writing, it's the people, it's every artist that made that thing happen. You listen to Mike Myers play Shrek and you think Shrek. You listen to Cameron Diaz and think Fiona, right? Simple. Eddie Murphy as Donkey. But when you really break down what it takes to write these things and what it does to create them, there's not a lot of feel in them anymore. And I feel like that's what sucks, right? If you get things that are just quickly generated, all right, well, here, write something about that. It's cool, but there's not the same touch as, so the head artist for Sleeping Beauty and Bambi was the lead artist for Hanna-Barbera that did all of the original backgrounds for Scooby-Doo. So when you look at all his specific type of art and what he does, it's a phenomenal fucking treasure trove. And the dude hand painted everything. All that texture you would see and everything, he would legitimately go and get a piece of acetate paper and he would just throw it in sand. And then they would put it and then he would paint over it just so it can get this weird texture that they would film. And you were like, wow, it's crazy. And the sad part about that guy is he was one of the last people, for anybody that wants to hear a very interesting podcast from the creators themselves of The Lion King and Mulan and all that, the Bancroft brothers. You know what I mean? They've had an animation podcast for years, and they talk about it where Disney and Pixar and all that had the last vestiges of people who sat down with each other and could draw and write and act together, where every animator had to sit down and look in a mirror and they'd go, and then they would draw that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, there was something about it where they would communicate and it would create something. Now it's like you said, it's just kind of computer made. So it's like this works with this and you're done. You have computer jockeys, not artists, you know, and that to me, I think that's what kills a lot of the actual what's it called? I think that's what kills a lot of the actual artistry of it. I asked the chat if you want to, you can ask some questions to us. Let's see.
It's like what beer I'm drinking.
Yeah, exactly. What beer are you drinking?
Mine Haze IPA Firestone.
Oh, Dom's in here. I don't understand
nice.
how Greg Glenn keeps getting work.
He's quick and fast.
Let's see. Constructive criticism. The D- show. What's up, bud? Constructive criticism can either help an artist or stop them in their tracks. Depends on how you take criticism and move forward with it. I feel like the difference between constructive criticism and critique. I talk about this a lot with like students, right? If you think something is if someone tells you something, you're like, oh, well, fuck, dude, they just don't like my shit. Versus them just suggesting something, right? Like, hey, to make it better. I feel like 9 artists out of 10 see it as criticism and 1 sees it as critique. And that's why that 1 usually goes further than the 9, right? Because you're not taking it literal as like, your work sucks. It's like, well, have you tried this? It's just a statement. It's not like, I don't like what you're doing. Oh, cool. I didn't think about that. You could do it or not. You know, who cares if you do it or not? But critique is extremely important, I think, for a successful artist, especially one who works freelance work, because that's all you get is fucking critique.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's almost like I expect it at this point. Like, I mean, in the early days, it was like definitely hurtful. But honestly, sometimes the client will like say something like a change or like suggest something, and it's like, wow, they're actually right. And I'll do it, and it's like, wow, that actually made a better piece. So yeah, I'm one of those people that I welcome critique, as long as it's not like you're being an asshole about it, and you're being like, I've never been very like, I'm too good for that shit, whatever. I'm always sort of like, I think it's, you need a little bit of a resistance from people to kind of like
succeed. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, I'm sure like tattoos are, I mean, because you have to kind of be well-rounded when you can't just know how to do one thing.
What the fuck does that mean?
Bad wording. Yeah. But you know what I mean. You got to sort of know. I watched Ink Master, goddammit, and I know how it is. It's like...
I'm very vocal of why I hate those shows, right? And specifically, I used to work in LA for a individual that was on those shows.
Oh, really?
It was pretty big back on the day. So they choose the winner 6 months before anyone's cast. So the winner for the season is already, yeah.
Oh.
If you read the voting at the bottom, it's $1.25 to $1.50 per text. They average about 1.9 million texts an episode. Do the math. On top of advertisements, on top of everything else. And they let them tattoo for like 11 to 12 hours. They let them finish. There's not one asshole up there, especially fucking the original judges or Navarro or Nico or whoever's there, because I know those guys. Like, I know Nico Hurtado. Okay, dude's cool.
Yeah, I remember seeing his work on like Kat Von D.
Yeah, all that. I've met and been around Kat Von D quite a few times, dude, and she is interesting. But I will say this: at the end of the day, they are getting a chance to be in Hollywood, and Hollywood is not real. No asshole's gonna sit at a thing and be like, yes, he's tattooing, yes, that's nice. No, they fucking go and take a lunch, they let them tattoo, and they come back. All right, time's up, guys. It's all fake. The way that it works in Ink Master is you have one winner with two people that can compete equally. So you have somewhat of a challenge and a fallback if that person ends up being like a chomo or some stupid shit. Then you have the 5 people who are expendable. Then there's always 2 assholes. There's a female who's too bad to the bone that you can't deny that she's fucking independent. And there's always some stupid ass guy who's like, I'm a firefighter and I fucking chew bubble gum and I fight fires when I start them. That's a firefighter. Wait, you do what? And I tattoo. You know, and then somehow those 2 assholes make it to almost the end. And you're like, how? Well, you know, you pulled through this time. And it's like, oh my God, but they make money that way. And what it really teaches from a tattoo artist perspective, what it teaches the new generation is being popular, being loud, and being aggressive gets you more than your actual skill. You know, this is a community. I speak to you as an artist. I don't demand things to you, of you. Back to the parables of pop. I'll start calling them that. But my dad would say, like, you don't demand respect, you command it. The way you carry yourself is how people respond to that. And I've been told many times, you're very intimidating. You're very this, you're very that. And I'm over here like, huh? Like me?
It's like, really?
Yeah. I'm just trying to eat a sandwich, brother. But like when you hear that thing, I think that's what's tough because you see the new generation of artists who, from a freelance perspective, they spend more time recording themselves doing things than producing. And from a tattooer's point of view, they spend more time, come to get ready with me today. And it's like, it's a whole thing. And then they never show their work. And I mean, look at me. I create content. Does that make me an asshole? Absolutely. I did this shit before it was cool. But to be honest, I'm like, you know, who's to know where Brushes of Doom would be now had I not taken such a large hiatus over the years. But the thing was the same. I've always wanted to see people just learn that couldn't have access to this stuff. This shit ain't cheap. You're in the actual room. You know
yeah.
it.
Yeah, man. It looks... I'm very impressed.
Well, thank you as a Slide Joe 20. So could you make that thing about my parents hugging me? Sorry, bro.
So I can't change that. That's permanent now. But whatever is said, yeah.
But you know what I mean and I feel like when people have those notions, they feel like, well, if homie's tough, I gotta be tougher. And that creates a really negative narrative. When you see people that create more content, recording themselves, making content than actually making art, that's where you start getting this really weird thing where I fear for people's mental health because I do feel that more people will kill themselves or hurt themselves or something because they're like, well, I thought I was supposed to do this and I thought this was supposed to work, but they're focusing on the wrong thing. It's the popularity and the idea of being an artist, not actually being an artist. You know, are you a tortured soul?
Yeah, for sure. My wife has to hear from me like pretty much every night. I mean, I'm very moody when it comes to my art. Like there's good art days and bad art days. I'm sure you know that feeling of just like you think you suck and you're like second guessing like, why did I pursue this for so long?
Right.
And all this other shit. And you know, yeah, definitely, man. Like but you know, it's like you wake up in the morning, sometimes you feel great, sometimes you feel like shit, sometimes you feel creative, sometimes you don't. But you know, like, you know, sometimes pushing through it is like the solution.
Yeah.
And I've done that many a time. I think that's kind of the difference between someone who just kind of like fucking goes, I'm gonna fucking not do anything and just, you know,
fuck off.
Yeah. And to me, it's like if I don't work on any kind of art or creative thing, I get super depressed. I mean, like to the point where it's like, why am I fucking
even here? Yeah. And I feel like that's the hard part is that's part of the transition of being an artist is understanding like you're never going to be okay. And that's okay. You just learn to work through it, right? You learn to find things that you bury yourself into. That's why I always tell people, if you want to work with headphones on, awesome. Like find your zone, but don't be rude. Like, you know, talk to your client, do this, do that. Because I tell my clients all the time, like, I'll talk for an hour and then I'll zone out for an hour. I'll talk for an hour. I'll zone out for an hour. And I'm very lucky my clients are like, whatever you want, man. But I know that I don't care. I could be doing time lapses. I could be doing this. I could be doing more of this stuff. But like, truth be told, it's like, it gets very tedious having to do this stuff. when I just want to do the art.
Oh yeah,
You know what I mean.
I'm kind of going through the same thing. I had this book cover artist named Chris McGrath, fucking amazing artist. I'm actually gonna have him on my future podcast show, but he was telling me like, yeah, just like the, showing people how you work and the process. It's almost like the mystery is gone, and I kind of battle myself because it's like, for me it's more for like getting more followers because potential work comes from that.
Right.
But then he was telling me, it's like, I've never gotten a job through Instagram. I've always gotten jobs through either my agent or contacting, a book publisher or whatever, just directly. And, part of me, I have gotten jobs through Instagram for, whatever, but it's definitely not as frequent. But yeah, I'm kind of the same thing. It's like, I do little videos where I did a video about like, showing my art book collection and things like that. And it's more for like, it's also for me for taking a break from the creative process, like kind of focusing on something else. Even the fly by night reviews thing was kind of done out of, I went through a deep depression, like when I, lost my job in November. Like I was like mentally not good, and the movie review channel helped a lot with that. Like it kind of took my mind off of it. I was able to focus on, okay, let's get this together, let's get this, and it's like, yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. When I was on Instagram, I would always do Book of the Week. I would do Ask Doom, and I have a bunch of videos on the YouTube stuff. Like I spoke about this on the Sacred Society podcast, but like I took the worst advice from somebody a long time ago because I felt like I was doing the wrong thing artistically, and that person was like, "You're a fucking sellout because of this," and it opened a lot of great doors for me. And I was helping a lot of people, but to them, they were like, fuck, dude, like, I wouldn't do that. And because I respected their opinion, I gave up that gig, and that gig ended up doing 50 times more amazing. Do I regret it? Not at all. I mean, I had my time. That person now makes live, laugh, love signs. I'm not even joking. Like, I'm not exaggerating. They literally do.
Right.
And it's like, man, but like, rather than be upset about it, it's they understood what it means to like actually have to provide. And I started pulling back more from sharing my thoughts and my ideas because specifically I was like, fuck, dude, I got to make money, and I got to create this and create that, because when you're tattooing, at some point you're creating for everybody else versus me now where I create for me. You come to me with an idea and I'll tell you if I want to do it or not. And it's not out of disrespect. It's just like, I know what I want to give effort to, and that's it. So like speaking to Mike, my instructor, he was like, he's the first person to ever do drum lessons on YouTube. And he invested into this little company back in the day called Twitch. Before it was something.
Oh, Twitch? I've never heard of that one.
Never heard of that. And, he's huge. He's fucking amazing. And now everybody copies him, right? His format is what everybody copies. And, I told him one day, I started a lot of this because of what he inspired me to do. And funny enough, he was one of my very first podcasts, and I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I was like, "Oh, fucking look at me!" And he, years later, I tattoo him, and he says, "You know what, man? You gotta bring something back like this, dude, for your art stuff, because," he goes, "TikTok is for people who need a sentence. Okay, no matter what you do, they're there to zone out for 2 hours. But they don't go for long format. They go for as much as they can get." He goes, Instagram and Facebook are for chapters. They just want to see what you're doing and then on to the next one. All that hard work you ever had, fucking out the door. YouTube are books. Nobody goes to YouTube and goes, "Gee, I wish I could see a 5-second video. I sure hope that there's 30 seconds I can watch." It's like they go there for a long format. And he goes, go back to long format because you're better at sharing who you are and what you believe in for your thing. So I shifted my mindset from being like, I don't want to, if nobody likes me and I lose all my followers, but I keep like 50 people who really appreciate just what I share, fucking cool. Because that's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
Like it's easy to say that now that I'm established, but I had always been that way. And that leads up to some of the questions that somebody asked. So the first question we have is Pueblo Esco. How do you know when you're done with a piece? Like there's always I should have added this or that. Thank you.
It's actually, for me, when I'm done with the piece, it's when I don't have to add anything. Like when you, I guess you can take stuff away, but for me, like it's like I'll have something in my head where I'll have it in my mind and I'll sort of do it and I go like, well, I was going to add this, but it doesn't really need it. So it's almost like when you don't need to add anything new, that's kind of when you know it's sort of done.
Right.
I mean, in my opinion, it's like, it's hard to explain. It's like, usually it's kind of you add stuff and then it's done. For me, it's like sometimes I remove stuff and I go, okay, now it's done. Like I dialed back a bit, you know. But it really depends on the piece too. Like if I'm working for a client or if I'm doing stuff on my own. I tend to do that more when I'm working on my own artwork because I have like, you know, all the control to change my mind whenever I want to. But when it's a client, it's like I have like the parameters. Like, okay, I can't go past this, whatever. But yeah.
For me, I think I'm done with something when I absolutely ask myself if the 5 minutes I could have spent more on it won't haunt me when I'm taking the photo. Today, I worked on an entire back. I've been working on bodysuits lately. Into my 18th year of tattooing, I feel like I really have always wanted to do bodysuits. I just love going big. My anime stuff, my realism, everything. I just love doing it, and it's much faster for me because I think in shapes versus like detail, right? Like you simplify things. And people are like, oh, it must cost an arm and a leg. And I go, I'll use an arm and a leg, but it ain't going to cost that. Like, I do things for passion now, right? And one of the biggest things that differentiates in my head for tattooing as it does for art, like as far as painting or sketching, is if I get lazy because I've been there for 8 hours straight, no breaks, I'll be like, I just want to get this done with. And then I think in my head, you're going to take a photo and you're going to look at that and be like, if I would have just spent 5 more fucking minutes and go from there. So I make it a point that in my head, I go ahead and I add that extra 5 minutes where I'm at. And when I finally am in my peripheral and I'm like, you know what? You've done everything you need to. Then you do what's called the eagle eyes view. You take a photo overhead of your work and look at that. It's like when they flip things digitally to see if they're like even.
Yeah, the mirror. They do the mirror trick where you kind of look at reverse. Yeah.
Yes, to see if the what's off about it, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, that's what's wrong with it.
That's on somebody's
whole
skin.
Fucking thing. Yeah, man, you must really love fucking Pikachu. It's my grandma. Oh, well, gotta catch them all. She's dead. Oh, you're a bad trainer. But you know what I mean is I feel like when I can take that overhead view and look at that and say, you know what, I'm happy with it and I don't need to spend any more, like I don't have to rush to it. I feel that's when I know when I'm done. Paint wise, it's never done, right? I'm never actually truly happy with it, but I have to know when enough is enough because art is about taking risks. And especially with watercolor, once you take that risk, you're like, I think this is going to look cool. How would I know if I never do it? And all of a sudden you're 20 hours into a painting and you do it and you're like, why the fuck did I do that?
Like, why did I add that extra layer?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
good.
Yeah, for me, it's like, it's a skill in its own, just walking away, knowing, even like you said, nothing's really completed or, you know, but walking away and moving on is actually a skill. Because like some people like do not know how to do that. They just like constantly tweak something and it's like, why are you, it's like, for me, it's like good enough. Like I'm sad because maybe it's because I usually produce a lot of work.
Yeah.
You know, or work like I need to go to the next thing. I like completing something and going, okay, that's done. I rarely go back and redo anything. Like I'll just like, you know, there have been a few pieces where I've revisited it because I'm like better and kind of make it a little bit, you know, more interesting, but very rarely. Like, but I know a lot of artists, they go back and they repaint something and it's just like, why? Like that's like living in the past. Like you can come up with something better now rather than going back and trying to tweak something. And
Kim Gee has this amazing quote that he had, and it was like, what was the worst thing about you as an artist when you first started versus now? And he goes, it would take me 30 strokes to what I could do in 2. And I was like, man, this guy's good. Oh, he's an artist. Oh, well, that's good too. And, but he would talk about like caricatures and how you would draw the shape of the face, single line. Draw the nose, single line, the eyes, single line, and the mouth, single line. And he goes, if you can't do that, then you don't really know how to do art. You can make art, but you can't do art. And people were like, well, art's subjective. Blah, 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 blah. And that's one of my favorite fucking quotes that people lie about all the time. Art is subjective. Absolutely fucking not. Because there was a teacher that said this one time. I was speaking at a school. And they go, you know, people love to say art is subjective, but I see parents come in when they do the sailboats, and we all know who's the good one. And I was like, yeah, that's such a great comparison. You know?
There's a universal, like,
everyone
things like beautiful. It's like the same thing when you see a beautiful woman. Like, there's a chance, like Kate Beckinsale or, Scarlett Johansson. Okay, like,
or
yeah.
my mom.
Yeah. Majority of people are going to be like, yeah, she's a beautiful woman. I mean, because there's, all that stuff. So, yeah, definitely there's good art and bad art, and like you said.
and I feel like, again, you can always have your favorites because it means something to you, but no, I feel like the main thing is when you look at something and you can absolutely break it down to the bare essentials of what it is, because people are like, oh no, art is subjective, and he's like, that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is can you just get down to what's important in the piece? From there, anything you add outside of the information that's necessary is your expression. And that's how I feel about like my tattoos. I used to cover everything up. Now 90% of it's open skin. And there's a high amount of volume of contrast in there. And because of that, you now see something that we're like, man, that looks really nice. Sure, thank you. Why does it heal so well? Because I'm using the canvas, like the actual natural canvas, as the base of that value. And someone's like, oh wow, that's pretty smart. It's like, well, yeah. Again, I'm learning from other artists that are teaching me these things that are like, yeah, dude, keep it this KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
If you can't do the bare essentials in there, you're not going to really understand what you're doing. Because anything outside of those few things you need to get, talking about the face again, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and the shape of the head, is your expression. And that's where, how do I stop? Well, get down the bare essentials and then just kind of feel it out. And then keep it going for a sketchbook. If you fucking love it, then you found something and tried things outside of that. If you don't love it, then there you go. You probably should have stopped a long fucking time ago. One of the questions is from No Name Collects, tremendous young man that is also a artist. If you could go back to when you started and tell yourself one thing, what would it be? Don't sleep with what's her face from Modesto. What would you tell? When did you start doing art? Like at what age?
Shit. I mean, like 5.
Okay.
Like I used to draw like. I mean, I got exposed to horror movies probably way younger
Same.
than I should have been. I saw Reanimator at age 5.
My man.
Stuck with me. But yeah, what would I do different? I would probably, like, if it was like 15 years ago, like if I knew what I knew now 15 years ago, I would probably be a lot more successful.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of it's laziness. A lot of it is not knowing how to deal with people, not feeling confident about your own abilities. And also just, it's so saturated now. Like there's so many programs out there that people can do. And like when Dave McKean or when Travis Smith were doing it, it was unique. Everybody was hand painting metal covers. They were like pioneers in doing photos, but like now everybody uses Photoshop. And so, yeah, 15 years ago, if I could master all the 3D stuff, what I know now back then, like, and just kind of like know how to, do all that shit, I'd definitely do that.
Yeah. I feel if I were to give myself some advice at all, let's see. If I were to give myself some advice when I first started, it would be, don't put your dick in a light socket. No. It would be, honestly, quit coveting things. So we talk about this quite a bit during like the seminars that I teach, and it's I don't like people who did not grow up with much, right? They fear messing things up that are nice to them. So they have what's called empty book syndrome. And EBS is basically when you go out and you've never had anything, so you buy sketchbooks and then you never fucking use them. It's like people who buy planners and like, this year's going to be great. And then fucking 3 weeks later, my life has gone to shit. Why? And because of that, you don't want to ruin a sketchbook because you're afraid that people will see how bad you are. And because of that, it rolls up for next month. I'll try this. I'll try. Well, I'll try drawing on other paper, and then I'll try doing this, and I'll try doing that. I really loved one of my brothers. His name is Barry Brown, Loaded Brush. Homie would go ahead and sketch, and then he would sketch on a piece of paper and throw it in his notebook, you know, and then and just accumulate these stacks of shitty art, mediocre art, and good art until he became great, which he's a fucking phenomenal artist.
Yeah, Barry's awesome, man.
Yeah,
he's great.
He's fucking awesome if he wasn't gay. Hey, we support you, Barry. But, you know, my point is that because of that, I feel like that's where it becomes such a hard thing because, you know, for years I would not sketch in my books without having to create a masterpiece. And the best advice I had gotten about that was from a friend in LA who was like, you know, I've done like 1,500 paintings in my life and none of them are really great, but I've done them. And he goes, you've done like 12. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, and they're really nice, but that's it. He's like, who here's the real artist? And in my head, I'm like, it absolutely is him because he went out and just found out who he was. And the dude's a tremendous, tremendous artist. And I think he is better than me. You know, it's just that idea of like, don't be afraid. Go out and try to just go buy a sketchbook and then write snakes, write women, write men, write scales, write birds, and just fuck it up. You know, here's a really great exercise. Sketch something and then take 3 minutes to sketch the damn thing and then sketch it in 30 seconds. 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And you'll start developing habits once you really look at what you're doing to build better confidence in things. Sketching with a pen versus a pencil. Having no fear of erasing, you know? Again, get your notebooks dirty. Get your sketchbooks dirty. That's the whole point of these things. So that's a good question. Thank you so much, No Name. We're also on Instagram Live. I don't know who's here. Nanny Cam. That's funny. Let's see. There's a whole bunch of people. You could be over here on the live chat on YouTube. You fucking bums. Okay, let's see. Right on, man. Thanks for the answers. Absolutely. I get that. On my first sketchbook, I spent a lot of time just copying images and not really practicing because I don't want to mess up the book. That is another thing, right? When you trace versus, not even trace, but copying things versus like venturing out on your own. How much do you really think that matters?
Yeah, I mean, because like, I think I did actually a YouTube video of like, I just showed my sketchbook because I had one at my old job. I had one at work and I would just kind of just draw my ideas. But yeah, my sketches now are like just consistent of like literally like little stick figures just to kind of like, not even the composition because I'm still working on that. That's one my main composition to me is like what makes art 90% good,
right? And
everything else is like okay, but now I struggle with that myself even with my digital stuff. But I'll just scribble it down just to kind of get like chick with horns, a little bit of, you know, and I'll even write text next to it just so I kind of remember it. It doesn't have to necessarily be the same layout or whatever. It's just to kind of remember how to, you know, so I don't forget it.
Right.
But I definitely haven't been doing that as much as I should. Like I have all this fucking free time and again, when you have all the time in the world, you tend not to do that stuff. But when you have limited time, you make that little bit of time count, you know?
Well, I also think like back to the beginning of the very beginning of the conversation is we ask the universe for $1 million and it hands you a hammer, right? It gives you the opportunities to achieve it. It doesn't give you the result because you'll learn nothing from it. And that sucks because as human, you're like, God damn it, just give me the fucking money. You know, like, you know who doesn't care about my inspirational story? PG&E. You know?
Oh,
and,
dude, tell me about it, man. Like in our bill, like the last month was insane.
Yeah,
Anyway.
my PG&E bill here is like $800 a month, dude, and it's like,
yeah.
But I mean, you know, the hard part about it is, you know, I talked to a good friend this morning who was talking to me about tattoos, and we used to work with each other. A fucking phenomenally sweet guy, and he said, like, you know, fuck, man, I used to make this, I used to do this, I used to do that. And I go, when I worked at this one shop where we worked, I used to make X amount of dollars. And now here, where I actually have to be accountable for myself, an overhead, you know, the clientele, the everything, I had to produce more. But in order for me to produce more, I had to produce better, because more doesn't come if the product isn't better.
Yeah.
And so, you know, pressure helps make something better if you can work on it, and you don't make it about you. That's such like an oxymoron, but it's true. It's like I've had people that have tried to apprentice under me and they fail miserably, because if you're going to apprentice under me, you have to really give a shit about art. You have to genuinely, like, there's not one book behind me or in this shop that I haven't read and know from fucking front to back about what it is, or I practice or something. But that doesn't make me better than you. That means that I have a certain standard of how things are. So when I'm sad, when my dad died, 100%, first thing I did, came to work, worked on a fucking tattoo, and it was the longest tattoo of my life. And when that was done, dude, this is super dope. I still wasn't making any money because we hadn't gotten the comic book side up yet. And so I go ahead and I start painting caricatures for people. And I was doing it, and people, oh, I want to hang it in my house. And it's this big ass fucking 16 by 24. I'm like, God damn it, dude. $200 just to get them out the door. But I was able to pay rent. The pressure that you get from things, I think, really helps produce what you want out of life. And it's like, cool. They call it a Jin's wish. I wish I weighed 200 pounds less, and then you lose your arms and legs. But this isn't what I wanted. You know, like, you have to be careful with your Jin's wish. Whatever you want in life, if the universe hands you a hammer, don't smash things, build them, work on them, make them better. Because at some point, you're going to have to leverage out what your worth is and what your art's worth is. Because if your art means more than you do, you won't survive. But if you mean more than your art, you won't survive. It's a balance. You have to have both. And I feel people don't really get that until they're older. Like I said, the whole thing earlier with these athletes. Athletes spend most of their career trying to learn a skill, and then they peak where their body physically can handle it, and then they lose momentum because they start aging and getting injured. Their brain is fucking sharp. They still want to learn in their head, but their body can't keep up.
Yeah, they can't perform.
Yeah, that doesn't work the same way with us. So we have to be able to embrace that more. Next question. This one is, hey, what's up, man? Choose creation over destruction every time. Thank you, AJ Schumacher Art.
Alex, that's my buddy Alex.
Oh yeah, he was on one of the podcasts way a long time ago.
Oh really?
Nice.
Yeah. He's actually my wife's friend.
Oh,
kind of. Yeah.
Let's see. There was another one. Question: what would be the ultimate gig for you as an artist?
Oh, for me?
Yes.
The ultimate gig. Man, I've accomplished so much throughout. You know, like, I would probably, you know, maybe 5 years ago or maybe 15 years ago, I'd say working on a band that I really love or respect, doing like an album cover. But to be honest, sometimes, like, you know, you get to that point when you actually do work for a bigger band and it's not what you thought it was going to be, and it's almost disappointing. So I think like my dream kind of gig honestly would just kind of like do what I'm doing now, but be able to land like 2 or 3 gigs a month, even if they were just like not great paying gigs. If I were to do 3 gigs a month, I would be completely satisfied. because you can set your goals like, oh, I want to do an album cover for Metallica or whatever.
Right.
But it's like once you do that, you think things are going to change for you, but it doesn't usually happen. Like,
you're not Metallica. You're the guy who did their album.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I've met people who've done amazing artwork for big bands, huge bands, and they're like still struggling. So it's like, you think, because I used to have that mentality, like, oh, if I do this thing for this one person, my whole career is going to take off because, or for whatever reason. And when it doesn't happen, it's like you're disappointed. So when you don't have that, that expectation, like, to me, it's just having a few gigs, even if it's for a local band, for anything, I'm completely fucking content. Like, I don't have to have any kind of high-end clients or anything like that. I'm just happy to produce and get paid for what I'm doing. Yeah.
My dream gig, let's see. I would love to be one of those Instagram artists where, like, I just do one little thing and they're like $50 million. And I'm like, I guess. Why not? Fine, I'll bathe in KFC butter. Bring the baste. I think for me, one of my favorite gigs, honestly, would be to work on a Studio Blur project where you're in a room with musicians, you're in there with architects, you're in there with digital artists, physical artists, storyboarders, and actors, and stuntmen and women who bring something like Love, Death, and Robots to life. Because I really, I'm a huge pulp fan, right? All the old pulp horror stories and everything, and just the huge amount of storytelling that people don't really know that in modern day sci-fi or horror comes from old magazines and comic books. And seeing it come together, one of my favorite video games of all time is the God of War, the remake, or not the remake, but the continuation.
Okay.
And the soundtrack, the actors, everything is just on fucking point. Everything about it is beautiful. The artwork, the storyboards. To be part of that process, I think I would love to do that once in my life, to be around such a high caliber of producing artists, because I would walk away not being someone who held my own, but learn how I should have been holding myself all along, at least how we feel in our head, but realistically how I should hold myself moving forward, to appreciate everything it takes to create that item. I would love to create something that doesn't just take me, you know what I mean? Because I can be self-sufficient, clearly.
It's all, yeah.
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 But like you said in the beginning, you miss those points where you work with people who really test you and push you, because that's where you absolutely thrive. You know what I mean? But okay, let's see. Any more questions on this end? Hey, Raul, what's going on? Okay, let's see. I'd love to work on a published actual comic. That's my dream, says No Name Collects. Okay. I believe that is all the questions we have for today.
All right.
Thank you guys for bullshitting with us. Kiren, please let people know where they can find you.
Well, I am on, of course, Instagram at KieranDigital 2.0. The reason why I had the 2.0 is because my last account got hacked like a year ago. Or I'm also on Facebook. Just look up Kiren Digital. I have a website, KieranDigital.com. I'm on YouTube as well, just Kiren Digital. There's not many Kiren Digitals out there, so just type in my shit and you'll find me. And then what else? Fly By Night reviews. Me and Dom do movie reviews every week. You can find us on YouTube, and it's Night, Nite. Yeah, and then I have a podcast coming out hopefully soon. I just need to get my ass into gear and come up with the name and logo and all that stuff. So, but yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you for hanging out with us. You can find all the stuff that you want to about Kiren, Fly By Night, his new podcast, his new artwork, and all that and more over at BrushesofDoom.com. You can always keep up to date with all things Sacred 8 here at Sacred 8 Studios, where you can find me. You can see more of the BODP, Brushes of Doom Podcast, on YouTube, where all of this stuff goes. More art of books, more live streams for the paint nights that I do, more interviews with people, and a bunch of other shit that's just for free because you guys were too cheap to buy it, you sons of bitches. But Kiren, thank you for hanging out, brother.
Yeah, man. Thanks you so much for having me, dude. It was awesome. It was great to chat, and yeah, thank you guys for tuning in.
Okay, and have a good night.
All right.
We're still live.
Oh, okay.
But
oh God, thank God that's over.
They can see us, but they can't hear us.
Dude, my knee just started fucking giving out for no reason. I'm like, what the hell?